Welcome to Lightning Talks for Legal Innovators. Thank you all for being here. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I'm your host for this Lightning Talk series in partnership with Gavel. I'm a lawyer, a veteran, a Gavel expert, and professional no-code, low-code developer, and the founder of Chromium Academy, where we have Gavel certification courses, as well as courses in software, Airtable, Go Full Page, and more. I'm also very privileged to be Gavel's global ambassador to law schools and the program director and senior instructor of their Law Students in Legal Tech Access to Justice Fellowship. Today, Conor Malloy, project director for Rentervention, will discuss the topic, how Rentervention uses OpenAI and Gavel to serve clients. Feel free to post your questions in the chat as you think of them, and Conor will pick them up once he concludes. After questions, I'm going to just share some announcements and do a quick wrap up, after which you're welcome to just stay on the call for an optional 5 minutes of speed networking, where I'm going to invite a few people to introduce themselves for about 1 minute each. You can let me or Tricia know in the chat if you'd like to introduce yourself during that portion of the call. So I'd now like to introduce today's speaker. Conor is an attorney committed to process automation, technology-driven legal practices, and improving access to justice through technology. Since graduating from Chicago Kent College of Law, he has served on the Tech Regulation Committee of the Chicago Bar Foundation and currently serves as the vice chair of the Illinois Supreme Court's Committee for Modernizing Service of Process. In 2018, the American Bar Association awarded him the Louis M. Brown Award for Legal Access, and he also played a vital role in a chatbot project that won the same award in 2021. This year, Conor received the Fast Case 50 Award, a recognition given to the most innovative and courageous individuals in law. And he also became a member of the inaugural AI Innovation Lab at the 1871 Innovation Hub, continuing his mission to democratize the law through AI. He currently serves as project director for Rentervention, which is an initiative of the Law Center for Better Housing. So thank you so much for being with us today, Conor. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Brittany, and thanks everybody for jumping on here and sharing this time with me. All right. So just a little bit of background, with the organization I'm with. Rentervention is a service of the Law Center for Better Housing. The Law Center for Better Housing has the lofty goal of, seeking safe, decent, and affordable housing for folks across Chicagoland. Has been doing it for about 40 years. Right. So, looking at this as just sort of a legacy legal aid organization with this Rentervention cap. But one of the things that drives me just beyond the housing issues is basic ideas about access to justice, right? Or rather like the access to the chance of justice, right? I don't know if any of us can really be vendors of justice necessarily, but a lot of data, and a lot of ink has been spilled about these topics. Particularly, several years ago, the Justice Cap report coming out of the Legal Services Corporation. Lots of pretty problematic numbers that come out of it, but where folks don't understand their issues as being legal in nature, don't know where to go, even though when they do know where to go somewhere, is that place where they should be. If they're looking for attorney assistance, is something going to be available to them? So, this journey is just, it's fraught with a lot of landmines, as some people might experience it. I'm primarily oriented towards, the digital world and potentially solving people's issues. I get it. It's not a silver bullet with what we can do with, digital innovation. However, one of the big things is, right, it can scale like nothing else, right? Where, traditionally the idea of scaling up was staffing up, right? So if you wanted to go under some new initiative or otherwise, the question was, like, okay, well, who's going to do it versus, well, what's going to do it? But when we look at people in, just the idea of the justice gap of just how many people aren't being served in this, traditional pinnacle of services is provided by humans, providing one-to-one assistance. A lot of folks fall through the cracks here. Well, it's not even a crack, right? This is just a big gulf that folks experience. So along came Rentervention. Some of the ideas behind Rentervention predate me. But the idea was with an organization in Illinois called the Lawyers Trust Fund, right, was to be able to say, well, how can we create a sort of a conversational experience to introduce a new service vertical into the law? So, how can we take it where you have, a lot of times it can be very monadic, I suppose, for what we see in traditional legal aid. You might have hotlines out there, you might have helplines, help desks, you might have traditional legal aid organizations coming in for intake. You could have a lot of states have websites, statewide websites to be able to help out with things. But those websites are just curating information. And sometimes that experience for folks might be a little alienating to just simply go on a website and start reading articles and plowing through articles. It's not necessarily what folks are looking for. And the idea is sort of bridging this gap between what people would expect is sort of this conversational experience where they pick up the phone, talk to an attorney, talk to some other sort of professional about their issue and get that human touch, as it were, even though sometimes attorneys aren't even good at providing a human touch in a lot of instances and don't really have that capacity for empathy. So when we look at the service vertical, at the bottom we have the conversational AI that Rentervention utilizes. So when we deal with that, right, and we're looking at this chart, so at the bottom, it has probably the most surface area. That's like the most traffic that we're going to get is being able to scale up and providing this conversational experience for people. And what that's going to provide is legal information, referrals, and just sort of connecting the dots for people and a great way for people to start off. The second one is our housing help desk. This is virtual, and we're just sort of bringing humans into the loop at this point. And a lot of times it's supervised by me and another attorney on my team. And then we have a cadre of paraprofessionals that work the help desk. And so they're on the front lines just fielding inquiries from people. And this is providing tailored one-to-one assistance, again, from legal information, referrals, as it were. And folks can pipe in to hear from the conversational experience. They can also pipe in to hear from more analog experiences between just calling in and leaving a voicemail, and there's different ways we triage that, but it all comes into the same endpoint, or texting, right? So people that might find themselves on the wrong side of the technology gap, a lot of gaps that I'm talking about here, but again, just trying to look at the system that we have, right, and seeing, okay, well, where's the last mile, where's the last yard, foot, inch, and so on, until we just keep closing in on it. And sometimes when you start getting microscopic, it expands into whole new worlds, and then you have to chase after that. But as things move up, we have our virtual clinic. That's where we're providing one-to-one assistance. And there's a lot of people in legal services world, or whether it be legal services organizations, nonprofits, or even the private sector, right? These are brief services. These are limited scope assistance regimens. So we might help somebody prepare a piece of work product. We might try to negotiate, we might coach somebody. A lot of these things that don't necessarily involve direct representation. And then sort of at the top here, even though before I was talking about how one-to-one assistance from an attorney isn't the pinnacle, but it's just, I put it up here because I think this is where the human resources, it really becomes apparent that human resources are definitely finite in nature, that we have extended rep available. And that's a lot of times, especially for the Law Center for Better Housing, that's going to be eviction defense, right? You got to have somebody right there next to you going through this process. Okay. But what I'd like to do here is jump in and take a look at just how Rentervention leverages AI. And so the thing that we're doing here is we're using OpenAI, ChatGPT. I feel at this point 4 works very, very well for our purposes. And the idea here is, how do we take an issue that somebody's experiencing and not necessarily give somebody menu options and all that stuff, where again, that can be alienating. They don't necessarily know how to put their issue into this neat little jar for you to be able to categorize it. How can I take something in plain language and then decipher it? And say something like, my landlord won't make repairs, okay? And what Rentervention is now doing here in the background is, first things first, is the text that you're seeing is some static text, right? a lot of concerns, whether it be just websites on their own or, especially chatbots and the like, is unauthorized practice of law, right? So first things first is just put some sort of a disclaimer up there. And this is, again, static text. This isn't the generative AI yet. To be able to say, listen, I'm not a lawyer. In case you thought there was a lawyer just waiting for you to text me at 2 a.m, I'm not here for you. And just being able to double down on that. The next thing that you're going to see is some generative text, right? So first of all, what the chatbot is told to do, and for those that don't know a lot about generative AI, right, is it's generating text out of something. ChatGPT and a lot of these models, they're fantastic at just creating text out of the ether. They know how we speak to one another. They know how we blog. They know how we write Wikipedia articles. They know what that looks like in a lot of different instances. And it's going to know what a New York Times article looks like than like Mike's blog about, some conspiracy theory, right? And how to be able to generate that language and what the audience might look like. So what I ask it to do in all instances is I say, I want you to express yourself in plain language at a 7th grade reading level. I've really hit the sweet spot. I was just talking to somebody the other day from Illinois Legal Aid Online, and they were having luck with 6th grade reading level. I found a marked difference between 6th and 7th, and actually 7th and 8th. 8th got pretty complex, but I like 7th grade, plain language. And the first thing it's going to do is express empathy, right? And what I love about this is it'll do it every single darn time. You instruct it to do it, and it's going to give you the same output. So I'm sorry to hear that your landlord is refusing to make necessary repairs, right? And then it's going to say how you're going to work together. And the other thing it's going to be able to do is when you're dealing with natural language processing, is to be able to say, okay, how does the issue you're experiencing meet up with the law, right? You get on the phone with an attorney might start throwing terms of art at you, and it could be very disorienting. So how do I take that your landlord isn't dealing with repairs and sort of bring it into the legal world? And you'll see here, it now introduced a new piece of terminology, conditions, right? We talk about that all the time, for lawyers that are dealing with this. So now it's sort of like dotting this conversation with these terms of art in a way that might be digestible. And like just about anything, right? A big issue is going to surround jurisdiction. And so, for a bot that is working effectively statewide, jurisdictions can be super duper important. We have a lot of jurisdictions that have their own landlord tenant ordinances. Some are following state ordinances, what have you. And so for some people, now that it knows that you're in Chicago, it's going to bring something to bear, and it understands that there's something called the Chicago Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance that might come into play. Now, this might not be your first rodeo. You might be smarter than the average bear, and you might know that the Chicago RLTO applies to you. Good, click it. You might know it doesn't apply to you. You also might not be sure if it applies to you. And so if you click on I'm not sure, it'll sort of run you through the subroutine to be able to quiz you and see if it applies to you. But for our purposes, we'll just go ahead and say it applies. Well, there might be some nuance to the conversation. You might be in Section 8 housing, some kind of subsidy where you might be worried if I actualize my rights or learn more about my rights, could I be jeopardizing things? So, some of these might sort of lead to a nuance of tread lightly. Just to keep things super duper simplistic, I'll just say none of them apply. And a lot of this is static text, as you've been seeing, so it pumps out just about the same thing every single time. This is something I introduced as a little bit of generative text, right? A core component of Rentervention is self-empowerment, right? Even when I was practicing law, and I had a couple of shops of my own, one of the big things for me, I loved it when limited scope representation became an ethical, it was fleshed out, right? And it was, we could do it and not worry about it. I love coaching people. I love sending people into court to carry their own water, to do things, and when it can be done responsibly. And so there's a little bit of something just to kind of like, hopefully make you feel good about this journey that you're going through. And you can do this, right? You can work through these types of things. So, as you continue, right, it's going to say, I found a few articles for you. Now, here's what the generative AI is doing in the background. We've got this wonderful knowledge base that my colleagues and I have put together, and particularly one of my colleagues, Ashley. She's just done a fantastic job. There's hundreds of articles inside of our knowledge base on various topics. So what it does is it's going to first summarize. It pulls 3 articles, right? This is sort of an ethical thing too. It pulls in 3 articles and it looks at these articles and it says, hey, let's give a summary of this in several hundred characters, again, 7th grade language, all that kind of stuff. Now, that's all fine, nice, and dandy, but the next thing you're going to run into is, well, let's click on it and see if this applies to me, like see which one appeals to me. Again, you'll get something of a summary. And what's great is I can go ahead, and if this looks like something that's up my alley, I can click on read more, go to continue, and it's going to open up the article. Right? Again, these are 7th grade, we keep them short, keep them sweet. But what's really important is to be able to allow the rubber to hit the road. And so for some of these things, if I want to withhold rent, I can go ahead and read an article, learn about some considerations in doing so, whatever else, but then click on something and it's going to open up a Gavel workflow, right? So there's this pedagogical component before you take action. And I get it, you could probably embed some of this in the app, and we sort of do, as you see here, and you can have an app sort of sit out there, standalone, and people can engage with it. But I like to be able to sort of tee people up, right? There's this ethics opinion that came out of Florida a while back ago, and concerning unauthorized practice of law. And they had this concern about the average citizen, right? What do they know? And so the practice of law was something that exceeded the knowledge of the average citizen. And I had a big problem philosophically with that statement is, well, what would happen if en masse we supercharge citizens, right? If we gave them information and teed them up, and we're also incorporating some case law into our knowledge base now, where people can begin to understand some issues that might sit on the periphery of what they're looking at. Again, distilled, not to trigger anybody that had to, do all their IRACs and everything else throughout law school, but we break it down into something of an approachable IRAC. But then to lead you to here, right? And as you navigate the workflow, and there's tools out there that probably look fairly similar to this. Like, this isn't something that's absolutely unique. I see here, right? With what the True did at JustFix, right? And you see a lot of modules that do similar things to be able to walk somebody through the process. Now, as people work through Gavel, and we have a handful of these types of workflows that are embedded in our articles, and they're all intertwined, and everything is connected so people can access this type of information. But one of the issues that we experienced was, great, so you're able to create a letter. Sometimes that I love to say it's even half the battle. A lot of times it's not even half the battle. Half the battle is just getting that in somebody's hand and starting that clock. Right. So if you have 14 days to be able to do something, and to be able to do those types of things, I remember after I got licensed, get your big fancy piece of paper up on the wall or stuff. I felt pretty good about myself. I had the minimum competence to practice law in the state of Illinois. But the thing I didn't have the competence to do was send a letter by certified mail returner that requested. I didn't know how to affix that sticky on the back and go through that whole. I felt like a moron. And so let's have to go to the post office, maybe the stuff's not there, whatever else. So one of the big things that we did is help people send them. So this is a little something that I shared before, but this is a Zapier workflow. So once somebody makes it through the process on Gavel inside of the workflow, and this is connected to a bunch of our workflows, is Zapier sitting there waiting to catch a webhook, right? So if we look at settings on integrations inside of it, right, we have a series of webhooks that connect with Zapier. And all a webhook is doing, for folks that might not be clear, is it's just waiting for that information just to kind of float through, the internet, and it's just waiting to catch something and pluck it out of the air. And so it has this nice little data packet. And so that data packet has everything that's been submitted inside of Gavel. And as we work through this workflow, right, so it's waiting for a package. Now that it has the package, one of the things that happens is Gavel creates a piece of work product, creates a file. So now I need to take that file and I need to do things with it. There's a great product called Convert API that we use to be able to take that. Now I can manipulate it in certain ways. And what I'm trying to do here is I want to be able to, first of all, as you'll see in one of the next steps, is I upload it into Google Drive, just to create a record of it somewhere else. I changed some sharing preferences because I need to be able to do something with that file, depending upon what somebody was looking for. People might think this is silly. I use Google Sheets as like a database for all sorts of stuff, especially for people in legal aid. Reporting it's like the bane of my existence, but it's also the lifeblood of my program. And I want to be able to distill things into a nice handy dandy spreadsheet that I can just do all sorts of things. So put it in a Google Sheet. But somebody might have ticked off several options once they're going through it, right? Because people communicate with their landlords in all sorts of ways. Somebody might pop into the office daily. Landlord might live in the same building. There could be a whole slew of experiences that people have with their landlords. But how do you then get this piece of work product into somebody's hands? Well, you can select, do I want to mail this to my landlord, right? Do I want to email it to my landlord? Do I even want to text it to my landlord? And so what the Zapier workflow will do is if somebody's selected that they wanted to mail it and they authorized our service to be able to mail it for them, it's going to mail the letter to them through a service called Lob by both certified mail, return receipt requested, so you get the electronic receipt, and it'll do it by regular mail, right? Little practice tip out there, because sometimes somebody might not accept a piece of certified mail, they might not be there for it. If you maybe had approved service and the regular mail didn't bounce back at you, I don't know, it's worth the argument to be able to have there. So, and then the next thing it's going to do is, as it works through that workflow, send regular mail, send certified mail, and this is all on our dime too, which is, I think, a great thing for folks. To be able to send an email to the tenant that just created all this stuff with the tracking number and all sorts of other goodies inside there, so they can take it. The other thing that we have here too is if somebody wants to be able to send it by text, right? What Zapier will then do for folks is it will convert the file in a service called Cloud Convert and break it down into PNGs. So then it can text all the images one by one to the tenant, and the tenant can then forward it, right? We can't do it on our end because there's certain regulations around sending it to a third party unsolicited. But you'll see it's able to break it down. It's always a minimum of 3 pages, so I know to be able to send all 3 of those. But after that, it can take it from there. And that's just a little bit of how we use Rentervention. Rentervention uses AI, and particularly we use Gavel to be able to supercharge what people are able to do out there to be able to actualize their rights and really let the rubber hit the road. But thank you, everybody.
That is so amazing. And we have a few minutes, and that's exactly on time. Conor, I knew you'd be exactly 20 minutes. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and just talk to Conor directly. Satish, do you have any questions?
Yeah, that was a great presentation. Thank you. I learned a lot. One thing that seems to be on the horizon is photographs. People take a lot of photos of conditions. And is there an easy way to add photos to this process?
For sure. I'll just pop back into my screen here. Easy is always everything's going to turn on easy, right? Like I'm always looking for elegant approaches to things whenever possible. But one of the things that happens here is what's great about these workflows and these apps, and a lot of the services do this too, is it's naturally bootstrapped, right? And so if you're on your phone and you're using it, everything's gonna contort nicely. So let's say as you select the issue that you're experiencing, so I got an issue in my living room, inadequate heat, blah 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 blah. As I go down, first of all, you got to be able to do like a little ipsum lorem there to be able to fill in some context. But it also asks you, would you like to add a photo? So I can click on add a photo, and you can just drag and drop to your heart's delight. And so one of the things that it's going to do for better for worse, it'll embed those photos into the, so it sort of does a loop as it goes through room by room in the piece of work product. It'll insert those underneath each one. The only little thing to be able, that people should be aware of, right, is it's going to put it in black and white when that goes out, obviously. If it goes out through mail and things like that. So if there's certain contrast considerations or otherwise, that's something to be able to be mindful of. But I hope this qualifies as easy enough.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. If a couple other people came off of their camera, so I just wanted to see if Ransom or Charlie wanted to ask a question. If you just wanted, or Suzanne, I'm sorry. If any of you would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute. Okay, so, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand how I can start using something like this in my practice, just as a real practical matter. It might be beyond the scope of this session, but I just thought I'd ask. It was great. Thank you so much, Conor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure there's, a lot of information out there on being able to sort of like treat, the practice of law as, just like commoditizing it almost and distilling certain things into discrete pieces of work product, right? Like I thought about a thing a while ago. I used to actually be on the landlord side of the equation. I represented small and medium-sized landlords across Chicago. And I looked at what my competition was doing for 5-day notices. They were charging for 5-day notices, like for non-payment of rent. And I thought, well, what if I can just create a way for them to make it on their own that would sort of like put the kittens on and guardrails, and they could do it, and they would have this like unimpeachable piece of product rather than something written on a napkin or, just some sort of other criminal notice that would imperil their case. And I could do two things. One, I could undercut what the market was doing because I was giving it away. But I was doing the second part of it is too, because this is the precipice of a case. And that's a good thing for a marketing purpose, because I know if you've given somebody a 5-day notice and I've collected that information, well, guess what I'm going to do? 5 days later, I'm going to hit you up and be like, hey, whatever happened with that 5-day notice? You get paid. If you didn't get paid, I'd offer my services as an attorney to be able to assist you. So just thinking about some of those like lower hanging fruit of pieces of work product that you output and be able to say like, how can I take that? Where is there a clear workflow in my head? There's not a lot of moving parts to be able to take that, distill it into something, and hand it off to somebody. And you can set up a paywall or do whatever else for these products as well. But in some instances, it might be a great introduction to be able to begin to create that trust between potential client and attorney.
Such a great answer. If we have any other questions, we have about 1 minute or so to field one more question. Dorna?
If no one has any other questions, I have a quick question. Conor, this was amazing. I think I really especially loved the pyramid that you put at the beginning, because many times, especially when we're talking about access to justice issues, we think of it so black and white, like it has to either be technology or it has to be a human in the loop at all stages of the process. I'm curious how you interface the technology with the humans, and maybe this is more than a 1 minute question, but what major challenges that you've seen there that you've been able to work through, if any? Yeah.
So we use several pieces of several platforms to be able to integrate all this stuff together. And so I sort of look at it as it's like an orchestra, right? And so I got a string section and the like. And Zapier sort of acts like the conductor to be able to integrate a lot of that, right? So I like to be able to take products, that are off the shelf that we can then deploy. So for our help desk that I mentioned, we're using Help Scout, so like a Zendesk Freshdesk type of product. For our chatbot, we're using Landbot. So we're not, and this can be like a big. Oh, I'm still sharing. I'm sorry, because this can be a big hurdle for a lot of folks, is to create these bespoke, pieces of technology. Then you got to train people up on, you got to maintain documentation, versus just passing that off onto a third party. And I think it's very, very accessible for our volunteer attorneys to be able to take cases on in our virtual clinic through Clio, and just be able to pull all these things together. And it's platforms that people might be very, very familiar with, or some UX team is getting paid a nice bit of coin to be able to develop these products, and I don't have to worry that like I created some wonky piece of garbage that somebody's not really going to use to its fullest extent. But I think that's like a big component about how we're able to piece it together.
Super helpful. Thank you for sharing.
Super helpful. And since we're kind of at time for the main portion, I'm just going to kind of wrap us up quickly here to say thank you so much to Conor. And if you'd like to connect with him, please find him on LinkedIn. I think that was fabulous. Just a quick announcement from Gavel that the new bundles feature is available at the Pro plan. So if you sign up before the end of September, which is coming up so soon, you can get $100 off for the first 6 months. So do reach out and go for that if you can. And then I'm just going to say as well, that our next speaker, I'm just going to quickly share who's actually here. Thanks for being here, Charlie. So let me just go to him. So he's going to be talking with us about understanding VC and legal tech challenges and opportunities. And he's a great person to have in the room because he's a venture partner with Going VC Partners. So we'll see him on October 26th at 9:15 a.m. Pacific time, same time that we're here now. So I'm going to go ahead and invite anyone who needs to leave now to go ahead and go if you need to. If you'd like to stay on the call for an optional 5 minutes of speed networking, feel free to. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.